Hey, well, welcome to the watch list. My name is Russ Matthews.
My name is Ben McEachen, not Laura Bennett.
Not Laura Bennett. I'm from Real Dialogue, and Ben is from Hope 103.2, but also has an extensive career of doing film reviews. So it's so great to be able to have you on as the co-host this week as we look at film through the lens of faith. And this could be a fascinating week. I'm looking forward to kind of looking at some of the filmmakers in this edition. We have both Wes Anderson and Guy Ritchie that we're going to kind of look at that both have labels of their own films. Really, you kind of look at a film and you kind of know it's a Wes Anderson film or a Guy Ritchie film. But before that, we're going to actually get into probably one of the biggest films of the year. I mean, it's outpacing Mission Impossible, Indiana Jones, Fast and the Furious, all of these things. Unexpectedly, Sound of Freedom.
Hear that? That's the sound of freedom.
I thought you would maybe just kind of set us up. What is Sound of Freedom?
It's loosely based on a true story of a guy called Tim Ballard, who used to be a US federal agent who was working in child protection, protecting kids, saving kids, rescuing kids out of being trafficked into slavery.
Right.
Awful, awful stuff. And the movie depicts him, played by Jim Caviezel, at a moment where he's had a long career and he's challenged about, well, but what has he actually done? He's put pedophiles and predators in jail, but has he actually saved children? And then the rest of the movie is him basically like on a one-man mission. He's helped by others, but he ends up going a bit rogue, going off out of the country into Colombia to rescue a particular young girl that's come across his path. So really the whole movie is about him and can he save this girl from the awful slavery, modern slavery that she's trapped in.
I just want to know, Ben, did you like it? Did you enjoy the film?
I did. I reckon it's like a solid 3 out of 5 stars kind of movie. It'll remind a lot of people of Taken, the Liam
Right.
Neeson film, of which I'm not a huge fan of. I really objected to the vigilantism in that film and how many people seem to justify the excessive violence, of which I don't think this film has, Sound of Freedom.
No.
But where people were justifying the actions in that film, I thought Sound of Freedom justified itself a bit better. It didn't exploit its subject matter. Instead, it just plonks us in this awful situation, and you get the movie bookended by family scenes that become increasingly disturbing in the middle, but without trying to give the game away at the end. So the way the film, I thought, anchored us in this world, this horrible world of children being trafficked.
Mm.
I thought they did a pretty solid job of them presenting it as a mainstream US film. And yeah, it becomes a bit of an action film as it goes along, but doesn't become so much, Russ, where it detracts from what I thought really was the message of the film, which is this is awful, this should be stopped.
I guess that's one thing I liked about the film, and that not I liked about it, but that I felt I respected about the film was that they took us to kind of to the point of the horror of what we're kind of experiencing here in this whole scenario, but yet close the curtain in time so not to take us across the line into something that would really be a travesty to even have to try and experience or even
Yeah, which makes total sense, doesn't it? Because the sensitivity of the subject matter, like you don't need to present it for anyone really to be gripped by how horrible it is. You just don't. And I'm with you. I think the filmmakers understood that as they went through. And what will you do when you are confronted with evil? Will you do the right thing? Or when something is wrong, will you do the right thing?
I think that that's actually probably one of the key points for me, because a lot of people have gone, why do I want to go watch a movie about this subject matter? And I thought, well, I think better than looking at it as maybe entertainment, looking at more as kind of an opportunity to be educated and then also move us to a point of action, which I think that that's kind of what the point of the film really is, more than it is to be purely entertainment. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. And apart from some of the cheesiness of the setup, I thought that was really far-fetched. And then even some of the process in which Tim Ballard goes about trying to rescue the children, I personally found, oh, this is stretching it a bit. Like this just seems like a movie. However, in real life, at least Tim Ballard and those that he's worked with allege that what you'll see on screen is a lot like what happens in the rescue missions that they've done. So apart from, yeah, some of the cheesiness, some of the movie stuff, I thought it was very glacially paced. I liked it as an example of if you have never confronted yourself with what goes on in the real world in this situation, because
Right.
this really happens. This is a somewhat nice almost entry point into challenging yourself about, well, what are you going to do?
I think that's exactly what this film moves us to. I think I would recommend people see it. I wouldn't necessarily say not to, but I would say it would be a bit of caution. I mean, it is subject matter that's probably for a mature audience only. This isn't. It's loosely a faith-based film. I think because it's
Pretty
associated with,
loose.
yeah, with Angel Studios. Also, even that Tim's not a Christian himself, but that that you're able to kind of go to the fact that it does have a faith element to it, but I don't think just because it does that makes it accessible for the whole audience. I mean, I think this is really for your mature teens and on up.
Yeah, and so it's been a bit of a surprise that there's been some movements around the place, particularly in the US, of Christians getting behind the film in a way which would suggest the film is quote unquote Christian, but it isn't.
No.
And there's like one or two lines in the film that talk about the value of God's children and them not being for sale. But apart from that, there's nothing really else in the film that's like straight up
No.
faith or Christian. But the film, hasn't it been, Russ, like a lightning rod of like
Oh,
all of these different types of controversies that I don't think you could have seen some of them coming, but not all of them. But there's a massive convergence of left and right sides of religion and politics. And then even Angel Studios' distribution model, and
yeah.
also Tim Ballard, whether he has or has not done what's up on screen, and then some of the investigations that are going on of the organizations he's been involved with, and then the QAnon stuff and Jim Caviezel's comments. And then the director in just the past week or so, Russ, just before it's coming out in Australia, Alejandro Monteverde, basically trying to distance himself from Jim Caviezel and what Jim Caviezel's been saying. Like, what? And all those TikTok videos about empty cinemas and were people in the studio or not.
Right.
Uh, it's incredible. And then it's good that we're having a conversation about the actual movie, because
Exactly. That's why I
separate to all
prefer to
those
stay in.
things.
I mean, I mean, I think it's definitely given rise to why it's had such a huge following. I mean, just people out of sheer interest, kind of wanting to know what is going on with this film. And it was one of the things that for me, because I've been watching it happening over the United States for a while. So then when finally to get to see it, I'm kind of going, oh, okay. I mean, wow, it's confronting and it's quite a tale. And I'm interested in it. It's really relatively good quality film. I mean, not great, but it was relatively good quality. But what was it that caused all this? And so it's fascinating how this kind of grassroots movement has kind of gotten around it, and then kind of this groundswell of audiences kind of getting along to it, or maybe not. I mean, whatever. I think that I'd rather kind of focus on the film opposed to like all these controversies that are so crazy and kind of diving into those, because it's really not. That's really even not my expertise. But I think that after seeing a film like this, that I was pleasantly surprised that it's one worth seeing, but I probably myself don't want to go watch it again, especially being a father, being a grandfather, all these sort of things. But I think that it does move us towards action steps. And I think that there are groups out there that are trusted organizations like Destiny Rescue, and that you can encourage people after seeing a film like this to take action. It's supporting it or being a part of the process or the solution, opposed to being part of the problem. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought a powerful part of the film, and I agree with pretty much all your comments there, Russ, about the actual film itself. And I do think that some people will be slightly disappointed when they see the film after there's been so much talk about it. You're
Yeah,
like, oh, it's just a movie. Like, it is just a
that's
movie.
right.
But yeah, what it does leave you with is wanting to pursue action, but I don't think it bangs you over the head with it. I was quite
No,
impressed with that. It doesn't become a polemic about you need to get up out of your seat now, rise up and do something, but it should, just by virtue of the subject matter alone, stir you into, at very least, considering what could I do.
exactly. That, and I think that that's what I came away with. There was a kind of an underwhelmed experience just because of all of the talk about the film, but then actually analyzing the film, I was like, well, no, actually, especially for a studio like Angel Studios to put this out, it was good quality. They did a great job with the story, and I really thought some of the characters were really well developed, and so overall, it was good. I would
Except
recommend it.
for Mira Sorvino as the wife, who is like one of the most underused actresses out of recent movies that I've seen. She must have been on screen for like 30 seconds.
The why she was even in it, you kind of go, okay, you're Academy Award winner, but you literally have maybe 5 lines, But well, I mean, what do you do? I mean, maybe some of it was all on the editing floor. I don't know what happened as far as what that was. But I mean, overall, I think that it would make the watch list for me, but it will probably stop after my first watching. I don't know. How about you?
Yeah, it makes mine largely because of the subject matter. I think that just gets it onto the list because people should be confronted by and talking about this, and we should be doing something together to stop it.
Yeah, definitely agree with you. Now we're going to really shift gears. I mean, we're not going to be talking about Fast and the Furious, but we are going to really shift it as far as looking at some of the different films that are coming out here in Australia specifically. But the first one we're going to look at is Wes Anderson's Asteroid City.
You're not here.
We're not there. The car exploded. Come get the girls. I have to stay here with Woodrow.
I'm not the chauffeur. I'm the grandfather. Where are you?
Asteroid City.
What's that mean?
I don't know.
I'm curious, are you a Wes Anderson fan?
Since day one, like since his first
Yep.
Rushmore, and if anyone hasn't seen that, they should rush out to see that
Exactly.
because he blew up more with Royal Tenenbaums and Life Aquatic and Grand Budapest Hotel. But before that, actually not even Rushmore. Sorry, Bottle Rocket was his
Bottle
first
Rocket
one.
was the first one. Yeah.
That's also a ripper, and you can even see from that like his style, just overall in terms of performance and look and costume and cinematography, all of it, editing is even there in the first one, Bottle Rocket, and he's just kind of gone on to become increasingly more Wes Anderson as he goes along.
Exactly. It's kind of like it's fascinating. He was at Wes Anderson at those beginning films because I remember Rushmore. I was like, wow. I mean, I went back to watch Bottle Rocket afterwards, but then Rushmore was just like, this is so unique, such a great style, so different within kind of the whole filmmaking realm. But then to see kind of what he's actually become over the years, because honestly, our family loves the Fantastic Mr. Fox. It was one of those. It's an interesting one that children would actually enjoy Wes Anderson. But I think that it's a hit or miss as far as people whether or not they like it or accept kind of what his style is. But it's interesting as you kind of go into Asteroid City because so it's kind of grown. He's so you have the Grand Budapest Hotel, which got all this attention. The Royal Tenenbaums got all this attention. But the French Dispatch didn't do all that crash hot. And then we're on to Asteroid City. And this one is one, again, very unique style too. I mean, same style with Wes Anderson. It's 1955. Students and parents are coming across America, and they're traveling to this imaginary American desert town called Asteroid City, which is based on where an asteroid had fallen thousands of years prior. And they have a celebration every year. It's the Asteroid Day, kind of coming in. And it
Of
brings
course.
in of course, as you would, and and they come in on trains, which as you would with a Wes Anderson film, and all of a sudden, all of them are at this one hotel or motel that's actually out in the middle of nowhere, and they bring all these unique characters in, so they get to book them all in and have some fun out in the desert in Wes Anderson style. And
And it's all
so
star-studded, isn't it, Russ?
that's the only issue. Okay, it's not the only issue for this
Okay,
film.
before we get to the issues, then let's start off with a positive. Then, what did you like about it?
Yeah,
Because
there it is.
we're both Wes Anderson fans, so like let's get to the positive first because I'm hearing some negative might be coming our way.
It's not all negative. It's just that I think almost Wes Anderson's become almost too big for himself. Like he's like trying to do too much of who he is, opposed to just kind of getting back to his basic. But
I think the French Dispatch was that it was like
yeah,
peak Wes Anderson, but further.
yeah, it just kind of went that way. Well, with this one too, I mean, I mean, the visuals. If you were to even just kind of turn off the sound and just watch this, you'd be marveling at it because I mean, what he's able to do with a frame and what he does with his characters and how he brings them all in, and he does do a masterful job of kind of doing backstories and the main story. They all woven together. That's kind of this circular kind of motion that kind of comes together in the end, where you're going, that doesn't make any sense, or maybe that's not the answer, or the satisfactory answer that you want, but yet it does in Wes Anderson's world, so it does all that. I really love the mastery of how he works with the words and also the visual complement to it all. But probably like you're saying, yeah, the challenge is now it's gotten to be this, who's the next celebrity game is what you're doing. It's like, I mean, how many more people can you add into this, and where it gets to be just kind of overwhelming. It's almost kind of going down the Mira Sorvino, what you were saying with that. Like, why would you bring that great actor in, but literally for a line, or literally for one scene? Doesn't make a lot of sense. And I know it's Wes Anderson. I know that's what they do, but with this one, it just got to the point where you're going, I'm not even sure why you had to have all of these various characters come in, because some of the dialogue is brilliant. I mean, it just takes you down some great paths as far as discussions on death, grieving, God, heaven, all these things and parenthood even, so I mean, it was fascinating to kind of look at, but it got to be a bit of a dog's breakfast after a while when you're trying to bring in all these different characters.
Oh, that's a pity. That's the same sort of critique could be offered of directors like Woody Allen, Robert Altman, Quentin Tarantino, even Martin Scorsese sometimes, where they load up their films with huge ensembles and they often can wrangle them very, very well and use them, even in small cameos, can use someone powerfully and effectively. And Wes Anderson's done that previously.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm not surprised to hear. I think The French Dispatch was like that a little bit too. It just
sure.
seems like you've got this cool actor because they're cool, and that's it. I can't see any other reason why why they've showed up. It's not for depth of character or for like significant impact or consequence that they're making upon the film, which is disappointing. Then to hear that Asteroid City is leaning more that way, in your opinion, Russ, compared with some of his earlier work.
Yeah, well, and here's what's funny. Here I get to bring in a Disney animated film. And it's Asteroid City, so there should be no surprise here. But in there's a film called Bolt, where all of a sudden these pigeons are trying to bring in these different ideas to be able to kind of get them to kind of do new direction with the TV show that they're doing, and they just wait for it. Aliens is what they do. And so with this film, all of a sudden it felt like that. All of a sudden you're going, oh yeah, yeah, I guess the aliens are supposed to be there, but it just all of a sudden they're there, and you're going, what was the point? Why did we do that? And so but then again, I will give this to Wes Anderson. I've only seen it the once. I have a feeling it's one of those films you need to see a couple times and you go, oh, maybe that's the layering. Maybe I missed that, because I think there are those different components. And so I'm not going to write it off completely, but for me, it just wasn't one that I go, yeah, I want to go see it again, like I did with some of his other films.
I feel like that about the Life Aquatic and the Darjeeling Limited Wes
Yep.
Anderson films, particularly Life Aquatic, which I think a lot of people, for some reason, which I don't understand, don't really like. I think it's fantastic. And the more you watch that, the layers, particularly relationships, and I think Asteroid City's got it as well. There's often relationships between fathers and sons or
Yeah.
brothers in
Right.
most of his films.
Almost all of
And
his films.
I have not investigated Wes Anderson's life, so I don't understand what his obsession, his apparent obsession with it is. But I've found in the Life Aquatic, yeah, the more you revisit it, it's not just the look and the feel and the coolness and the wit and the sophistication of like everything that you can see on screen. There's more depth and emotion in the relationships on screen than what it might suggest on first blush, because he is such a consummate visual and audio storyteller.
Exactly. So that's why it's kind of more the jury's out on this one for me. I mean, now I'm going to have to admit it. I'm a loyalist in the sense of Bill Murray wasn't in this movie. And so
Oh,
because he had COVID. Unfortunately, he got COVID right before filming of it. And so it's funny how, because he's been in every single one of his films, I think, except for maybe Bottle Rocket. But
I think that's right.
I
Yes.
think he's in all of them. And so within that, he just adds, there's something about it, there's just something about his character, his style, that he just adds to the layering of it all. And Steve Carell did a great job of kind of taking on the role that Bill was supposed to do. But it I think for me, I'm not going to necessarily just write it all off. I'm going to need to go back and kind of watch it a few more times, but it wasn't one that I went out going, yes, I'm going to recommend this to everybody.
So what will you be dwelling on though? So as you revisit it in your mind, and it sounds like you're trying to get it from 3 stars to 4 stars, as you're thinking about that, Russ, what are you left contemplating?
You know what? This film is fascinating because, like some of the things you brought up from Life Aquatic, it actually did this. But one of the key things was the father-son character, as far as Augie and his son Woodrow. And one of the things that occurs, you see it in the trailer. Augie's wife has died, but he hasn't told his children yet. And so it's like you laugh, but it's actually quite tragic. But then he finally, one of the lines he uses, he said, "Well, she's in heaven, even though I don't believe it exists, because I'm an atheist, but you're Episcopalian because your mother, and so that's what you believe," that kind of thing. And then it goes on to kind of showing the influence of their father in his faith position actually changed all of the children eventually to kind of what their faith positions were. And it really stood out for me. Again, it'd be fascinating to kind of know what Wes Anderson's background is, why he even kind of digs into that kind of realm. But because he plays it for laughs, but really it's a very deep and meaningful thing when you're looking at how influential you are as a parent to your child, especially when it comes to your faith, and really talking about what it is that you believe or don't believe about God. And I felt that really stood out to me because it wasn't just played for a line or a throwaway line. It was kind of a very significant component of the film that kind of was a thread that went throughout. And I think it's one, especially as a father and a grandfather, really kind of looking at the value of really investing in our children, especially on the topic of faith. All right. Well, hey, now talk about going the opposite end of the spectrum.
Why he wants this job.
I need the money.
Don't disappoint and turn out to be a pain in the ass.
No, not me, sir.
You think I have a choice? There is no choice.
This is largely set around a U.S. Army Sergeant, John Kinley, who's played by Jake Gyllenhaal. It's in about 2018 in Afghanistan, and the backdrop is how the U.S. military and other international forces, including Australia, were working with local people as translators to help find and stop Taliban insurgents. And this film, The Covenant, really anchors in the relationship between John Kinley and a translator called Ahmed, who's played by Dar Salim. Russ, I don't know, I've never seen Dar Salim before, but he's going to get so much more work. That guy was
He
superb.
was great. I mean, I'm like,
My
well, actually,
goodness.
both of them. I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal. Here, we're already jumping into the review, but
Let's go, because basically that's the setup. And then to give too much more away is to give too much more away. But you could imagine that probably things aren't going to go well. And then they have to work out how to get through those things. And the two of them may be united in that. But heading towards where it gets to, Russ, I'm trying hard to choose my words carefully because I really enjoyed and was gripped by how it unfurled and where it eventually got to. But the two of them together are one of the main reasons to see this film, Jake Gyllenhaal and Dar Salim.
because I think that both of them. I mean, I think Jake Gyllenhaal is probably one of the most underrated. Even though he's had a successful career, but yet I think that he's just willing to go in and just kind of put himself all into these characters. He
Amen.
becomes
Preach
them,
it, brother.
you know. And so I just have really enjoyed his career throughout. I mean, pretty much every role he's been in, I've loved the film because of him. Usually more so than
Because
maybe
he
even the
did
film.
another soldier movie, was it Jarhead with
Yeah,
Sam
Jarhead.
Mendes years ago, and End of Watch. This reminded me a bit of that
Yeah.
character in End of Watch. He can play like a really hardened bloke, Jake Gyllenhaal, but there's something relatable about him, even though in this one he's kind of hard as nails, and there's some humor in him every now and again, but he's often just really kind of stoic. But there's something that is a bit brittle about him at the same time. And then matched up with Dar Salim, I really like the
Man.
backstory that they gave
Yeah.
Ahmed, which is very loosely described, but it's so well defined that it makes a lot of sense of even when you get to some of the more intense and more movie-like situations. There is a great shootout scene in this film that runs for 3 minutes, and you know that because they tell you there's a bomb set and it's going to go off in 3 minutes. And instead
Exactly.
of where other movies you're like trying to count down the seconds of like, how are they going to stretch this out? And this is all a bit ridiculous. And you get caught up in trying to work out, oh, they're just trying to be smart here, and I'm going to pick them at where they've done the cuts and all this sort of thing. I didn't do that in
No.
this one, Russ. I was engrossed in how are they going to get through this in 3 minutes and do what they're going to do. And then when they get to on the other side, Russ, I found this is a great example of Guy Ritchie's The Covenant and why it's so strong is even with all the way they manipulate the situation to get to the other side, what they've already explained about these characters and where they get to makes total sense. And
It
I
does.
believed it.
It's believable, almost to the point. I don't know about you, but I'm like going, "Is this a real story? Is this a real
Yeah,
story?"
it
I
feels
was
like,
sitting
how
there-
is it not a real story?
I was like, "When this has got to be a real story." So that was where I just felt like he just cut this line that was like, "Going, oh man, you want this to be a real story. You want to know that this actually happened because it was extraordinary, but it's still believable." Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
it's big, but yet it really kind of brings in. But the one thing I really loved what he's able to do, I think that it's something very unique to Guy Ritchie in this modern era, and especially within that kind of military atmosphere, and also his relationship with Abdul, is the relationship and communication between men in particular, kind of the visceral, minimalistic, but yet how it can be a look, how it can be just one phrase, a turn of phrase that just kind of turns everybody around. And some of the scenes, they virtually had no dialogue, but yet it was still so deep and meaningful. You're going, I was like laughing. There was a whole scene that you would go, that wasn't comedic, but it was hilarious how these two men were just kind of interchanging between one another. And you're going, oh, I love it. He just captured something about that just really helped to kind of complement and lift this to even a kind of a higher level for me. So I really did. Outside of, I think one of the things you're going to say, putting his name in the title of the film, maybe that was a bit much, but besides that, I think that The Covenant was great. Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. I don't know if we really needed his name there, but anyway.
Yeah, that's like my one negative comment about the whole movie. Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. Like, why would you need to put your name like badged right across the title of the film? It is his most mature work, though.
It is.
At least from what I've seen. You've seen much more of his stuff, but I was really pleasantly surprised with how strong this was. You're right about the understatement, the minimalism in it. It gets bombastic occasionally, and particularly towards the end, I thought it was starting to push it a little bit. But what you saw between Ahmed and John in the middle of the film, and then how that sets up what John goes on to do, I thought you've sold me on all of this. You've captured this so well that even if I'm not totally buying what's happening in the finale, I'm still with you on this journey. And I think one of the
Exactly.
reasons, and this goes back to the Sound of Freedom thing, Russ, is where the Tim Ballard character in Sound of Freedom is confronted with, what am I going to do about this? There's something wrong here. I know what the right thing is to do. I'm going to do it. I think John Kinley's character in The Covenant is like to the next level, where he's tormented and racked by the almost the inconvenience of being put in a situation where you can see what the right thing is to do. You know it's going to be super hard. Other people aren't doing it.
Right.
Like, oh my goodness, I'm losing sleep. The only answer is I'm going to have to do it. And there's a personal, almost guilt-ridden reason why he does. But beyond that, Russ, I just found him a great portrait of someone who, and this isn't me, like this actually challenges me. This is not me, where you get confronted with a situation like this, and this John Kinley character is like, well, I'm just going to have to do it.
That's right.
There is this is exactly the right answer. And
That's
the conversation he has with his wife, in contrast with Tim Ballard and the Mira Sorvino character in Sound of Freedom, which is basically non-existent, the exchange he has with his wife about what he's then going to go and do for Ahmed and his family, like that felt real. And that felt like,
did.
you can understand his wife saying what she does and the response that she has. So there was so much realism and believability about this film, Russ, and it's not even a true story, but it's clearly based on true events. And if you've seen and followed any news headlines from Australia, US, since the Taliban reclaimed Afghanistan, since the Western forces left, there's been a lot said about the treatment of translators and the ones that helped the military forces, and the way they've been treated, or not so much since then.
Exactly.
This movie makes a really great statement about them without rubbing in your face, I didn't think.
No,
It's
I didn't.
more, this is apparent. It's like, you can't deny this.
Yeah, I think that it showed the accountability on both sides, and also kind of the travesties of war. But then what they really able to nail is kind of the loyalty of men, and what are you willing to do? This goes back to even what we were talking about with Sound of Freedom. What would you do in that scenario? Would you be willing to step up, or would you think that this wasn't really my responsibility and I just need to let it go? And so I really found that the loyalty factor just was wonderful. But then on top of it, it was just a really good film. And like you said, I think it reminds me of, there's a couple films back that he did called Wrath of Man, that also was a very more mature film, less comedy and more just telling a great story, really in a nice, concise way. I think both of them have really done that well. So
Yeah,
I
I
think
love that it was called The Covenant, that it like threw us back to biblical language of a covenant being, it's like, that's like more than a promise. It's like more concrete, more,
right.
you can't break it than that. And if you go into the covenant with a mindset of, it's this like unbreakable bond that you can't renege on, that's a really strong undercurrent that goes through the covenant right to the final moments.
Exactly. So, all right. Well, hey, we've come to the end of the watch list. Well, wait a minute before we go on. So
Oh, yes.
it sounds like both of us would probably put Guy Ritchie's The Covenant on your watch list. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, I was hoping that was clear, Russ. Yes, that's a big yes from me.
Definitely for me too. So I definitely think that, as far as looking at it, we both would say that Sound of Freedom, definitely worth seeing. Asteroid City is worth seeing, but probably I'll have to go back and see it again. I may come back to you guys and see whether or not I liked it even more. And then definitely probably the highlight of this watch list was probably Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. Worthwhile seeing. Streaming right now on your local service, most likely on Prime Video. There is another great film coming out. It's worthwhile seeing called Blackberry. If you can remember the Blackberry phone, it kind of talks about. Yeah, it even talks about that kind of rise and fall of that phone prior to the iPhone, how it was really the dominant force within that. And it's hard to imagine that a corporate film like that would be interesting, but it was really worthwhile. So it's worthwhile getting out to see. So, hey, thanks so much. Make sure you're subscribing to the watch list and also the other podcasts, because Ben, you have quite a few other podcasts on there on Hope 103.2 as well as Laura Bennett. So make sure on Hope 103.2 that you're subscribing to it. Also, stay on your YouTube channel if you're watching it on YouTube. And just remember, we're here at the watch list. Next time, we may be able to pull up your chair, grab that popcorn, and join us on the watch list.